The millionaire humiliates an elderly woman on the plane, and the next day he sees her in his boss's office, Gabriel Varela, settled into his first-class seat, feeling the softness of the leather beneath his fingers. At 35, he was the very image of success: impeccable suit, luxury watch, and a briefcase that held the secrets of his next big deal. The plane hadn't taken off yet, and he already had his laptop open on the tray table, ready to dive into work. "Mr. Varela, would you like something to drink before takeoff?" asked a flight attendant with a rehearsed smile. "A whiskey, no ice," he replied without looking up from the screen. His fingers flew over the keyboard, adjusting figures on a spreadsheet that could mean millions for his company. As he savored the first sip of his drink, Gabriel glanced around. Satisfied, he noticed the absence of children in first class. Nothing would disturb his concentration for the next few hours. The captain announced the imminent takeoff. Gabriel put away his laptop, but his mind kept working, reviewing strategies and numbers. The roar of the engines drowned out the murmur of the passengers, and soon they were in the air. As soon as the seatbelt sign turned off, Gabriel returned to his work. Minutes turned into hours, and he barely noticed the passage of time. Absorbed in his world of figures and projections, a sudden commotion pulled him out of his concentration. Irritated, he looked up to see a flight attendant leaning over an elderly passenger a few rows back. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The flight attendant's voice sounded concerned. The elderly woman, with silver hair and a kind face now contorted by discomfort, shook her head. "I'm having trouble breathing," she managed to say between gasps. The flight attendant looked around, assessing the situation. Her gaze stopped on Gabriel and his spacious first-class seat. With a determined step, she approached him. "Excuse me, Mr. Varela," she began, her tone professional but urgent. "We have a passenger who needs more space and comfort. Would you be so kind as to give up your seat? We could accommodate her here so she can recover." Gabriel blinked, incredulous. Give up his seat? The seat he had paid a small fortune for? "I'm sorry, but no," he replied curtly. "I paid for this seat precisely so I could work without interruptions. Surely you can find another solution." The flight attendant insisted, explaining the gravity of the situation, but Gabriel remained firm. "Look," he said, his tone curt. "I understand it's a difficult situation, but it's not my problem. I have crucial work to do, and I can't afford to lose a minute." Frustrated, but professional, the flight attendant walked away. Gabriel returned to his laptop, trying to ignore the looks of reproach from nearby passengers. Minutes later, he heard how another passenger voluntarily offered their seat. "How noble," he thought sarcastically. "But business is business. You don't get to the top by being kind." The rest of the flight passed without incident, at least for Gabriel. When the plane landed, he was the first to leave, his mind already on the important meeting the next day. As he walked through the airport, he couldn't suppress a smile of satisfaction. He had managed to finish his work, and tomorrow he was sure he would close the deal of his life. What Gabriel didn't know was that that flight and his decision would mark the beginning of a chain of events that would shake the foundations of his carefully built empire. Fate, as it often does, had other plans for the ambitious businessman. The next morning dawned bright and promising for Gabriel Varela. He dressed in his finest suit, an expensive, custom-made Italian suit that accentuated his athletic figure. In front of the mirror in his luxurious penthouse, he adjusted his silk tie mentally, rehearsing his presentation once more. "Today is the day," he told himself, his green eyes shining with determination. "Today I close the deal that will change the game forever." The trip to the office was quick in his luxury sports car. As he entered the imposing glass and steel building that housed his company's headquarters, Gabriel felt the familiar surge of pride. Every inch of that place was a testament to his success, to his vision. "Good morning, Mr. Varela." His assistant, Claire, greeted him as soon as he set foot on the executive floor. "The meeting is scheduled for 10 o'clock, sharp in the main conference room. All the documents you requested are ready." Gabriel nodded, barely registering her words. "Perfect, don't let anyone bother me until then. I need to review my notes." He shut himself in his office, going over the presentation he had meticulously prepared during the flight once more. Each slide, each graph, each number was designed to impress potential investors. This negotiation would not only mean millions for the company, but would cement his position as one of the most brilliant businessmen of his generation. At 9:55, Gabriel left his office, folder in hand, ready to conquer the conference room. Claire was waiting for him with a cup of coffee, which he took without even looking at her. "Mr. Varela," Claire began, her tone hesitant, "there's something you should know." "Not now, Claire," Gabriel cut her off, walking towards the conference room. "Whatever it is can wait until after the meeting." As he opened the doors to the conference room, Gabriel stopped dead in his tracks. Seated around the long mahogany table were not only the investors he expected to see, but also his main partner, Samuel Duarte, a respected businessman in his 60s, known for his wisdom and experience in the corporate world. But what really surprised him was the presence of an elderly woman seated next to Samuel. With a start, Gabriel recognized her. She was the same elderly woman from the plane, the one who had needed help and whom he had denied his seat. "Gabriel, good thing you're here," Samuel greeted, standing up to shake his hand. "Let me introduce you to someone very special. This is my mother, Elizabeth Duarte." Gabriel felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Samuel's mother, the woman he had treated with such indifference on the plane, was none other than the matriarch of the Duarte family. "It's a pleasure to formally meet you, Gabriel," said Elizabeth, her voice soft but firm. Her eyes, the same piercing blue as Samuel's, seemed to see right through him. "Yesterday we didn't get the chance to properly introduce ourselves." Gabriel swallowed, his mind working at full speed to process this new information. The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Duarte," he managed to say, shaking her hand with a forced smile. Samuel, oblivious to the tension between them, continued, "My mother, although officially retired, has been the driving force behind many of our greatest successes. When I mentioned this negotiation to her, she insisted on being present to offer her perspective." Gabriel nodded mechanically, his confidence wavering for the first time in years. The presence of Elizabeth Duarte completely changed the dynamics of the meeting he had so meticulously planned. "Well, shall we begin?" asked Samuel. Indicating for everyone to take a seat, Gabriel sat down, his mind racing to adjust his strategy. As he opened his folder and turned on the projector, he couldn't help but notice Elizabeth's serene gaze upon him. Would she mention the plane incident? Had she already told Samuel? With a supreme effort, Gabriel focused on his presentation. This was his moment, his opportunity to shine. He wouldn't let an uncomfortable encounter from the past ruin everything he had worked for. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice regaining its usual confidence, "we are here to discuss an unprecedented opportunity." As he spoke, Gabriel was aware of every reaction in the room, especially Elizabeth Duarte's. The negotiation he had envisioned as his great triumph had now turned into an unexpected test, and Gabriel Varela was determined to pass it no matter the cost. The presentation by Gabriel flowed with the precision of a Swiss. Watch graphs, projections, and market analyses succeeded each other on the screen, supporting each of his claims with concrete data. His voice, normally confident and convincing, resonated in the conference room with an additional touch of intensity, as if he were fighting not only to close a deal, but to prove something. The investors listened intently, occasionally nodding and taking notes. Samuel Duarte, seated at the head of the table, maintained a neutral expression, years of negotiations having perfected his poker face. But it was Elizabeth, with her piercing gaze and slight smile, who unsettled Gabriel the most, as you can see, continued Gabriel, pointing to a particularly impressive graph. "Our projections indicate exponential growth over the next 5 years. This project will not only generate immediate profits, but will position us as undisputed market leaders." It was at that moment that Elizabeth Duarte gently raised her hand. Gabriel, unable to ignore her, yielded the floor with a tense gesture. "Mr. Varela," began Elizabeth, her voice calm but firm, "your projections are certainly impressive. However, I wonder if you have considered the long-term impact on the communities where you plan to implement this project." Gabriel blinked, momentarily disconcerted. "Of course, Mrs. Duarte. Our plan includes the creation of numerous jobs and—" "I'm not referring just to jobs," Elizabeth interrupted gently. "I'm talking about sustainability, about real corporate social responsibility. In my experience, the projects that truly endure are those that consider not only economic benefit, but also the well-being of people and the environment." A silence fell over the room. The investors exchanged glances, some nodding thoughtfully at Elizabeth's words. Gabriel felt a mix of frustration and anxiety growing in his chest. This was not the direction he had planned for the meeting. "I appreciate your perspective, Mrs. Duarte," he said, striving to maintain a respectful tone. "However, I believe my proposal already adequately addresses those aspects. If you'll allow me to continue." But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. Throughout the rest of the presentation, Gabriel noticed how the investors asked more questions, questioning aspects that had previously seemed clear. When he finally concluded, the atmosphere in the room was very different from the enthusiasm he had anticipated. The investors thanked him for the presentation, but their expressions were cautious, reserved. "Thank you, Gabriel," said Samuel, standing up. "It's been a very comprehensive presentation. I propose we take a break for lunch and resume discussions this afternoon. There's a lot to consider." As the others left the room, Gabriel stayed behind, reorganizing, his papers with slightly trembling hands. He felt a mix of anger and frustration bubbling inside him. "Mr. Varela," Elizabeth's voice startled him. He hadn't realized she was still in the room. "I hope you haven't misinterpreted my comments. I only want what's best for the company and for everyone involved." Gabriel straightened up, facing the older woman. "With all due respect, Mrs. Duarte, I believe your comments were unnecessary and potentially detrimental to this negotiation. I have years of experience in this field and I have decades," Elizabeth interrupted him, her tone firm but not aggressive. "I've seen companies flourish and fall, young man. True success, the kind that lasts, is built on more solid foundations than mere numbers on a spreadsheet." With those words, Elizabeth left the room, leaving Gabriel alone with his turbulent thoughts. He slumped into a chair, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. How had it come to this? The negotiation that was supposed to be his greatest triumph now hung by a thread, all because of the intervention of a woman who, just a day ago, he had considered irrelevant. Gabriel looked out the window toward the skyline of skyscrapers that stretched before him. He had built his career, his fortune, based on his instinct and his determination. He wouldn't let this stop him. With renewed determination, Gabriel stood up. He would find a way to salvage this negotiation, with or without the approval of Elizabeth Duarte. The days following the confrontation with Samuel and Elizabeth were a blur for Gabriel. He packed his personal belongings from the office under the curious gazes and whispers of his employees. Claire, his loyal assistant, watched him with a mixture of concern and confusion as he emptied his desk drawers. "Mr. Varela," she ventured to ask, "is everything all right? There have been rumors—" Gabriel paused, holding a framed photograph of himself receiving a business award. His reflection in the glass stared back at him with a tired and bitter look. "I'm just taking a vacation, Claire, nothing to worry about." But even as he uttered those words, he knew they were a lie. This wasn't a simple vacation. It was an exile, a test, and possibly the beginning of the end of everything he had built. That night, in the solitude of his luxurious penthouse, Gabriel poured himself a glass of whiskey and stepped out onto the balcony. The city glittered beneath him, a sea of lights and promises. How many times had he looked out at this same view, feeling like the world was at his feet? Now that view only reminded him of how fragile his position was. He spent the first days of his leave locked in his apartment, alternating between anger and self-pity. He replayed the events that had led him to this situation over and over, looking for justifications, blaming others. But in moments of clarity, when the effect of the alcohol wore off, an uncomfortable truth began to emerge. Maybe, just maybe, Samuel and Elizabeth were right. It was in one of these moments of lucidity that Gabriel made a decision. If he was going to use this time, he would do it his way. He packed a suitcase with essentials and, without telling anyone, boarded a flight to a small Caribbean island where his family used to vacation when he was a child. The contrast couldn't have been greater. From skyscrapers and boardrooms, he transitioned to white sand beaches and small seaside cottages. Suits and ties were replaced by t-shirts and shorts. And for the first time in years, Gabriel found himself without an agenda to keep, without calls to make, without emails to answer. The first days on the island were disconcerting. Without the constant buzz of business activity, Gabriel felt lost. But slowly, almost without realizing it, he began to relax. He started to notice things he had forgotten. The sound of waves breaking on the shore, the taste of freshly cut fruit, the feel of sand between his toes. One morning, while walking along the beach, he came across a local fisherman repairing his net. The man, with sun-weathered skin and deep wrinkles around his eyes, smiled at him and greeted him in broken English. Gabriel, moved by a curiosity he hadn't felt in years, stopped to chat. The fisherman, who introduced himself as Miguel, began to tell him about his life on the island, about the daily struggles and small joys. "Every day is a gift," said Miguel, his eyes shining as he looked out at the horizon. "We have little, but we have enough. And at the end of the day, what more can you ask for?" Those words resonated with Gabriel more than he would have liked to admit. That night, sitting on the small terrace of his cottage, he reflected on his conversation with Miguel. When was the last time he had considered a day as a gift? When had he felt he had enough? As the days passed, Gabriel began to establish a routine different from anything he had ever known. He rose with the sun, spent hours walking on the beach or exploring the small island. He talked with the locals, listening to their stories, learning about a way of life so different from his own. One afternoon, while helping Miguel load his boat, an activity that Gabriel of a month ago would have considered unthinkable, the old fisherman asked him, a question that caught him by surprise. "Gabriel," said Miguel, his voice worn by the years but full of wisdom, "what is it that you're really looking for in life?" The question hit Gabriel like an unexpected wave. He fell silent for a moment, the words stuck in his throat. I've always sought success," he finally replied, but even as he said it, the words sounded hollow in his ears. Miguel smiled, a smile that seemed to contain all the secrets of the universe. "And what is success to you, my friend?" That night, lying in his bed, Gabriel couldn't sleep. Miguel's words echoed in his mind, forcing him to face truths he had been avoiding for years. What was success, really? The numbers in a bank account? The power in a boardroom? Or was it something more? Something he had perhaps lost sight of a long time ago? As the weeks passed, Gabriel began to notice changes in himself. His skin, once pale from long hours in the office, now had a healthy tan. The worry lines on his forehead began to soften. And, most surprisingly, he began to smile more, to laugh even, something he couldn't remember doing in years. But not everything was peace and tranquility. In moments of stillness, when the sun set and the island was enveloped in the calm of the night, Gabriel's thoughts would return to the company, to Samuel and Elizabeth, to the life he had left behind. What would happen when he had to return? Could he reconcile this new perspective with the corporate world? That had been his home for so long? One morning, while helping Miguel repair the roof of his modest house, another activity the old Gabriel would have considered beneath him, he had an epiphany. "Miguel," he said, putting down the hammer and looking at the old fisherman, "I think I've been living my life backwards. I've been chasing things, money, power, thinking they would make me happy. But here on this island, with so little, I feel more fulfilled than ever." Miguel nodded, as if he had been waiting for this revelation. True wealth, Gabriel, is not in what you have, but in what you give, in how you treat others, in how you care for the world around you. Those words were like a key that unlocked a door in Gabriel's mind. Suddenly he saw with clarity how his obsession with personal success had blinded him to the needs of others, to his responsibility to the community and the environment. That night, sitting on the beach under a starry sky, Gabriel made a decision he would return to the company. Yes, but not as the same man who had left. He would bring with him the lessons learned on this island, the wisdom of Miguel, the peace he had found in simplicity. He took out his phone, which he had kept turned off for weeks, and switched it on. He had hundreds of unread messages and emails, but he ignored all but one. With trembling fingers, he typed a message to Samuel. "I'm ready to come back. We have a lot to talk about." As he pressed send, Gabriel felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. He didn't know exactly how his return would be, how this new self would fit into his old life. But for the first time in a long time, he felt he was on the right path. What Gabriel didn't know was that his return would trigger a series of events that would shake the foundations of the company and put his newly discovered perspective to the test in a way he could never have imagined. The airport buzzed with activity as Gabriel Varela set foot in the arrivals terminal. The contrast with the quiet island that had been his home for the past month couldn't have been greater. The noise, the rush, the frenetic energy of the city, it all felt strangely foreign to him now. Dressed in a simple shirt and casual pants, Gabriel drew attention, but not in the way he was used to. He wasn't the powerful executive in an impeccable suit that everyone knew. This Gabriel, tanned and with a several-day stubble, looked more like a relaxed tourist than a business shark. As he waited for his luggage, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Samuel. "Welcome back. I'll see you in the office tomorrow at 9. We have a lot to discuss." Gabriel took a deep breath. The moment of truth was approaching. That night in his penthouse, Gabriel found himself restless. The view of the city from his window, which had once filled him with a sense of power and accomplishment, now seemed a reminder of all he had been doing wrong. He wondered what Miguel would think of all this, of this life of excess and unbridled ambition. The next morning, Gabriel dressed carefully. He chose a suit, but one simpler than he used to wear. He wanted to project professionalism, but also the change he had undergone. As he entered the company building, he felt all eyes on him. Employees whispered and pointed discreetly. Claire, his assistant, greeted him with a mixture of surprise and relief. "Mr. Varela, welcome back," she said, her voice betraying her curiosity about the evident changes in her boss. "Thank you, Claire," Gabriel replied, with a genuine smile, something that took the assistant by surprise. "It's good to be back." When he entered Samuel's office, he found not only his partner, but also Elizabeth. The tension in the room was palpable. "Gabriel," Samuel greeted, his tone cautious but not hostile. "It seems the time off has done you well." Gabriel nodded, taking a seat in front of them. "It's been revealing," he said, carefully choosing his words. "I think you were right. Samuel, I needed this time to reflect." Elizabeth watched him closely, her sharp eyes searching for signs of sincerity or deceit. "I'm glad to hear that," said Samuel, "but you'll understand that we need more than words. The company has been in a state of uncertainty since your departure. Investors are nervous, employees are confused. We need to know exactly where you stand now." Gabriel took a deep breath. This was the moment he had been preparing for during his flight back. "I understand, and first of all, I want to apologize to both of you," he said, looking at Samuel and Elizabeth. "My behavior, my approach, they were wrong. I've spent this last month reflecting deeply on who I am, what I want, and what kind of legacy I want to leave." He paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I've come to the conclusion that our company has the potential to be much more than just a money-making machine. We can be a force for good, for positive change, and I want to be part of that change." Samuel and Elizabeth exchanged glances, a mixture of surprise and caution in their expressions. "That sounds promising," Samuel said slowly. "But how do you propose to implement this new approach?" Gabriel leaned forward, his eyes shining with a new determination. "I have some ideas. First, I want to review all our current and future projects under a new lens of social and environmental responsibility. Second, I propose creating a department dedicated exclusively to sustainability initiatives and community support. And third, I want us to start measuring our success, not just in terms of profits, but also in the positive impact we generate." Elizabeth, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. "Inspiring words, Gabriel. But are you prepared for the challenges that will come with this change? Not all investors will agree. You might face resistance even within the company." Gabriel nodded, a small smile on his lips. "I know, and I'm prepared for it. In fact, I look forward to it. It will be a challenge, yes, but one worth facing." Samuel leaned back in his chair, studying Gabriel with a new appreciation. "All right," he said finally. "It seems your time away has truly made a difference. I'm willing to give you a chance to put these ideas into practice. But you'll be under observation, Gabriel. We need to see concrete actions, not just nice words." "I understand," Gabriel responded, "and I'm ready to start today, if you'll allow me." As he left Samuel's office, Gabriel felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. Changing the direction of a company as large as his would be like trying to turn an ocean liner. But for the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing the right thing. What Gabriel didn't know was that his transformation and his new ideas would soon face their first major test. A crisis was looming, one that would test not only his new principles, but also the loyalty of everyone around him. The weeks following Gabriel's return were a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, he began implementing changes in the company. Almost immediately, he called meetings with department heads, presented his new ideas, and began working on creating the new Sustainability and Corporate Responsibility Department. At first, the reaction was mixed. Some employees, especially the younger ones, embraced the new initiatives with enthusiasm. Others, more entrenched in the old ways, showed skepticism and even resistance. Gabriel spent long hours at the office, but now it was different. He was no longer the obsessed workaholic fixated on numbers and profits. Now his energy was focused on how to make each project, each decision, have a positive impact beyond the bottom line. One afternoon, while reviewing some reports in his office, Claire entered with a worried expression. "Mr. Varela," she said, her voice tense, "there's something you need to see." She handed him a tablet with a news article open. The headline made Gabriel's heart sink. "Environmental scandal, leading company accused of massive pollution." As Gabriel read the article, his concern grew. One of the company's subsidiaries, acquired just before his forced retirement, was being accused of dumping toxic waste into a major river, causing significant damage to the local ecosystem and potentially putting entire communities' health at risk. "This is a disaster," Gabriel muttered, running a hand through his hair. "How did we not catch this before?" "The article says the practices were occurring since before our acquisition," Claire explained, "but as the new owner, the responsibility falls on our company." Gabriel stood up from his chair, his mind working at full speed. "I need to talk to Samuel and Elizabeth immediately and call an emergency meeting with the legal and public relations team." As he headed to Samuel's office, Gabriel couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Would he have overlooked this in his former obsession with profits? Would he have ignored warning signs in his rush to close the acquisition deal? Samuel and Elizabeth were already aware of the situation when Gabriel entered the office. The tension in the air was palpable. "This could sink us," said Samuel, his voice grave. "Investors are panicking, stocks are plummeting, and the media is out for blood." Elizabeth, always the voice of reason, intervened. "What's important now is how we respond to this. It's a crisis, yes, but also an opportunity to demonstrate that we've truly changed." Gabriel nodded, grateful for Elizabeth's perspective. "You're right, and I think I know how we can do that." Over the next few hours, Gabriel led a series of marathon meetings. He worked with the legal team to fully understand the scope of the problem, with the public relations team to prepare a response, and with environmental experts to develop a remediation plan. Finally, close to midnight, Gabriel called an emergency press conference. Standing in front of a horde of scandal-hungry journalists, Gabriel made a decision that surprised everyone. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. "A few hours ago, we learned of the allegations against one of our subsidiaries. I want to be clear. These practices are unacceptable and go against everything our company stands for." He paused, looking directly at the cameras. "I could stand here denying responsibility, blaming the previous management of the subsidiary, but I won't. As leaders of this company, the ultimate responsibility is ours, and we are prepared to take it fully." A murmur ran through the press room. This was not what they expected. Effective immediately, Gabriel continued. We are implementing the following measures. First, we will immediately suspend all operations of the subsidiary in question until we can ensure they meet the highest environmental standards. Second, we are committing $100 million to the cleanup and restoration of the affected river and surrounding areas. We will work closely with environmental experts and local communities to ensure the ecosystem is fully restored. Third, we will establish a compensation fund for the affected communities to cover any related medical expenses and support the local economy during this difficult time. Fourth, we are initiating a comprehensive environmental audit of all our operations globally. We never want something like this to happen again. Finally, I personally commit to overseeing these initiatives. I will spend the next months working directly with the affected communities and the cleanup teams. This is not just a corporate issue, it's a human issue, and we will treat it as such. The silence that followed his words was deafening. The journalists were stunned. This was not the typical corporate response of denial and minimization they expected. Finally, one reporter raised her hand. Mr. Varela, these measures will cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars. How do you justify this to your shareholders? Gabriel smiled slightly. Some time ago my answer would have been different, but today my answer is this. The true cost would be doing nothing. The true cost would be losing the trust of our customers, our communities, and our planet. We are investing in our future, in the sustainability of our business and our world, and I firmly believe that, in the long run, this is not only morally right, but also financially sound. As Gabriel continued to field questions at the back of the room, Samuel and Elizabeth watched with a mixture of pride and concern. He's changed, Elizabeth murmured. He's really changed. Samuel nodded. Yes, but the question is, will it be enough? This crisis could sink us all if we don't handle it correctly. The following days were a frenzy of activity. Gabriel, true to his word, flew to the affected site to personally oversee the cleanup efforts. Images of him, dressed in work clothes helping in the river cleanup, went viral. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, Samuel and Elizabeth dealt with the financial fallout. As expected, the company's stock had dropped dramatically. Some investors were furious, demanding the resignation of the entire board. One afternoon, while Gabriel participated in a video conference from the cleanup site, he received unsettling news. Gabriel, said Samuel, his face grim on the screen, Marcus Reeves is organizing a group of investors to force a change in leadership. They're arguing that your handling of the crisis is too costly and that you're putting the future of the company at risk. Gabriel felt a knot in his stomach. Marcus Reeves, the same investor he had tried to influence during that fateful meeting before his retirement. Now, it seemed his old tactics were coming back to haunt him. What options do we have? Asked Gabriel. Not many, responded Elizabeth, joining the call. Unless we can demonstrate quick results, both in the cleanup and in financial recovery, Reeves could succeed in his takeover attempt. Gabriel fell silent for a moment, looking out the window of his temporary room. He could see the cleanup teams working tirelessly at the river, the members of the local community offering their help. All they had achieved in the past weeks could crumble if Reeves succeeded. I'm not going to back down, he said, finally, his voice filled with determination. We've taken the right path, and I'm going to fight for it until the end, but I'll need your help. Samuel and Elizabeth exchanged a look across their respective screens. We're with you, Gabriel, said Samuel, but it will be the battle of our lives. As he ended the call, Gabriel knew they were entering uncharted waters. The environmental crisis was just the beginning. Now they faced a fight for the very soul of the company. What Gabriel didn't know was that this battle would bring to light long-buried secrets and test loyalties in a way he had never imagined. The fate of the company and everyone involved hung by a thread. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Gabriel divided his time between the cleanup site and the head office, fighting on two simultaneous fronts. On one side, the environmental restoration, efforts were progressing slowly but surely. On the other, the corporate battle intensified day by day. Marcus Reeves had managed to gather a significant group of disgruntled investors. His arguments were persuasive. Gabriel's response to the crisis was too costly, too risky. He painted Gabriel as a naive idealist who was driving the company to ruin in the name of social responsibility. One afternoon, while Gabriel reviewed the latest progress reports in his temporary office near the cleanup site, he received an unexpected call. "Gabriel, it's Elizabeth. I need you to return to the city immediately. Something complicated has come up." The urgency in Elizabeth's voice put Gabriel on alert. "What's happening, Elizabeth?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "It's better we discuss it in person. Be discreet." Intrigued and worried, Gabriel took the first flight back to the city. When he arrived at Elizabeth's office, he found not only the Duarte matriarch, but also Samuel and, surprisingly, Claire. His assistant, "What's going on?" asked Gabriel, looking at the tense faces around him. Elizabeth took a deep breath before speaking. "Claire came to us with delicate information that could change the entire landscape of our fight against Reeves." Claire, visibly nervous, stepped forward. "Mr. Varela, I've been investigating on my own since this crisis began, and I've discovered something about Marcus Reeves, something he's kept very well hidden." Gabriel sat down, bracing himself for what was to come. "I'm listening, Claire." "Reeves isn't acting alone," Claire began. "He's working in conjunction with a rival company, Green Tech Industries. They've been planning this hostile takeover for months, since before the environmental scandal broke. Gabriel felt his blood run cold. "Are you saying Reeves knew about the environmental issues before they came to light?" Claire nodded gravely. "Not only that, I have evidence suggesting that Reeves and Green Tech might have orchestrated the leak of information to the media, hoping to create exactly this crisis." The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Finally, Samuel spoke. "If this is true, it completely changes the game. We could expose Reeves, discredit his takeover attempt." But Gabriel wasn't convinced. "Wait a minute, how did you obtain this information, Claire? Is it legal? Is it ethical?" Claire seemed to shrink a little at the question. "I may have accessed some emails and records that I technically shouldn't have seen, but everything I found is real, I swear." Gabriel ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of the decision they faced. Using this information could save the company, but at what cost? "Gabriel," intervened Elizabeth, her voice soft but firm. "I know what you're thinking, but consider this. Reeves and Green Tech aren't just trying to take over the company. They're willing to cause a real environmental disaster, to harm entire communities just for profit. Don't we have a responsibility to stop them?" Gabriel stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that stretched before him. The old Gabriel wouldn't have hesitated to use this information to crush his opponents without mercy. "But now I need time to think," he said finally. "This isn't a decision we can make lightly." As the others nodded in understanding, Gabriel couldn't help but feel that they were at a turning point. The decision they made here would not only affect the future of the company, but would also test their new principles and values. What Gabriel didn't know was that as they deliberated, other forces were in motion. Marcus Reeves, sensing that his plan might be in danger, was preparing his own desperate move. And somewhere in the city, an investigative journalist was about to uncover a piece of information that would shake the foundations of everything Gabriel thought he knew about his company and its history. The storm that was coming promised to be fiercer than any of them could have imagined. Gabriel spent the night tossing and turning in his apartment, weighing the implications of the information Claire had discovered. On one hand, using this information could save the company and all the jobs that depended. On it, on the other, doing so would mean compromising the very ethical principles he had sworn to uphold. At dawn, he made a decision. He called an urgent meeting with Samuel, Elizabeth, and Claire. "I've been thinking all night," Gabriel began, his voice tired but determined. "And I believe we have to be better than our opponents. We can't fight unethics with more unethics." Samuel frowned. "Gabriel, I understand your position, but do you realize what's at stake? If we don't act, Reeves will win." "I know," Gabriel responded, "but if we win using his tactics, What do we become? No, we must find another way. Elizabeth, who had remained silent, finally spoke. I agree with Gabriel, but that doesn't mean we should ignore this information completely. Perhaps there's a way to use it ethically. Gabriel nodded, grateful for the support. Exactly. We won't use the illegally obtained information, but we can use what we know to guide our investigation. Claire, can you work with the legal team to find legitimate ways to investigate Reeves and Greentech? Claire nodded energetically. Of course, Mr. Varela, I'll get on it immediately. As the team began to work on their new strategy across the city, in the offices of a major newspaper, a young journalist named Sofia Mendoza was about to make a startling discovery. Sofia had been investigating the environmental scandal since it broke, but her investigations had led her far beyond what she expected. Reviewing old corporate records, she found something that left her breathless. It can't be, she murmured to herself, checking the documents over and over to make sure she wasn't making a mistake. What Sofia had discovered was a hidden connection between Gabriel's company and Greentech Industries. That went back decades. It seemed that the two companies, now rivals, had once been part of the same corporation, split in a bitter family conflict that had been carefully erased from public records. Meanwhile, Marcus Reeves was not willing to sit and wait passively. Suspecting that his plan might be in jeopardy, he decided to accelerate his timeline. He called an emergency meeting of the board, intending to force a vote to remove Gabriel from his position. Gabriel received the news of the meeting with a mixture of frustration and determination. It's now or never, he told his team. We have to present our case to the board and convince them that our approach is the right one. As Gabriel and his team prepared for the battle in the boardroom, Sofia Mendoza was making a crucial decision at her desk. The information she had discovered was explosive, potentially devastating for both. Companies publishing it could be the scoop any journalist would dream of, but it could also have unforeseen consequences for thousands of innocent employees. With her heart racing, Sofia picked up her phone and dialed a number. Hello, Mr. Varela? My name is Sofia Mendoza. I'm a journalist. I have information that I think you need to know before your meeting with the board. Gabriel, surprised by the call, listened with growing astonishment as Sofia revealed what she had discovered. The story that emerged was one of family betrayal, buried secrets, and far-reaching consequences. When he hung up the phone, Gabriel stood still for a moment, trying to process what he had just learned. The revelation changed everything, shedding new light on the conflict with Reeves and Greentech. With this new information, Gabriel knew he had to completely rethink his strategy for the board meeting. Samuel, Elizabeth, Gabriel called his allies, we need to talk now. In the minutes remaining before the meeting, Gabriel quickly shared what he had learned from Sofia. The revelation that his company and Greentech were once one, divided by a family conflict, left Samuel and Elizabeth stunned. How is it possible we didn't know this? Asked Samuel, his voice tinged with disbelief. Elizabeth, however, seemed less surprised and more resigned. There are many things from the company's past that were kept secret, even from us, she said quietly. Gabriel stared at them. Is there anything else I should know before I walk into that room? Elizabeth sighed deeply. Gabriel, there's a reason Marcus Reeves is so determined to take over our company. He's part of the family that founded Greentech. The division of the original company was the work of his father and mine. The revelation hit Gabriel like a punch to the stomach. Everything made sense now. Reeves's determination, his insider knowledge of the company, his apparent lack of scruples in his takeover attempt. This changes everything, Gabriel murmured. We can't face this as a simple corporate battle. It's a family conflict that's lasted generations. At that moment, Claire burst into the office. Mr. Varela, the board is ready. They're waiting. Gabriel looked at Samuel and Elizabeth. Are you with me in this? Both nodded without hesitation. To the end, said Samuel, with one last deep breath. Gabriel opened the doors to the boardroom. The tension in the air was palpable. Marcus Reeves was seated at one end of the long table, a confident smile on his face. The other board members looked on expectantly, some with expressions of concern, others with evident hostility. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Gabriel began, his voice firm despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "Before we make any decision today, there is crucial information that everyone needs to know." Over the next hour, Gabriel revealed everything he had learned. He spoke of the company's hidden history, of the family conflict that had led to its division, and of how those old grudges were now threatening everyone's future. As he spoke, he saw Reeves's expression change from confidence to shock, and then to barely contained fury. "This changes nothing," Reeves interrupted, standing up. "The company is in crisis because of your mismanagement, Varela. My offer still stands, and it's the best option for everyone." Gabriel faced Reeves directly. "Is it, Marcus? Or is it just the next move in a vendetta that's lasted decades? How much longer will we allow the mistakes of the past to dictate our future?" He turned to the rest of the board. "I ask you to consider not just the numbers, but the real impact of our actions. Yes, our response to the environmental crisis has been costly, but it has also been the right thing to do. We are setting a precedent, showing the world that companies can be profitable and responsible at the same time." "What I propose," Gabriel continued, "is not just a new direction for our company, but a reconciliation, a way to heal the wounds of the past and create a better future, not just for us, but for all the communities we serve." The silence that followed his words was deafening. Gabriel could feel the weight of every gaze upon him, judging, evaluating. Finally, one of the oldest board members spoke. "Mr. Varela, your honesty is refreshing, but how exactly do you propose we proceed?" Gabriel took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. "I propose a merger," he said, causing gasps of surprise across the room. "Not a hostile takeover, but a true merger between our company and green tech, joining our forces, our resources, and our knowledge to create something better than the sum of its parts." He turned to Reeves, who was staring at him with a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Marcus, I know there's a history of pain and resentment between our families, but I also know that deep down we both want what's best for our companies and the people we serve. What if, instead of fighting each other, we join forces to face the real challenges that lie ahead?" The room fell silent as everyone processed Gabriel's proposal. It was bold, unexpected, and potentially transformative. Reeves, for the first time, seemed to be at a loss for words. The fury in his eyes had been replaced by a look of confusion, and perhaps a glimmer of hope. Gabriel knew he was playing his last card. Everything depended on this moment. The decision made here would not only determine the future of the company, but could change the course of an entire industry. As he awaited the response, Gabriel couldn't help but think about how far he had come from that day on the plane, when his arrogance and selfishness blinded him to the needs of others. Now he was putting everything on the line for a greater good. What Gabriel didn't know was that this proposal would trigger a series of events that no one could have foreseen, leading the story to a climax that would shake the very foundations of everything they thought they knew. The silence in the boardroom seemed to stretch for eternity. Gabriel could feel each beat of his heart, each held breath around him. Finally, Marcus Reeves stood up slowly, his face an inscrutable mask. "Gabriel," he began, his voice charged with conflicting emotions, "I must admit you've surprised me. When I came here today, I was prepared for a battle, not for this." Reeves paused, looking around the room at the expectant faces of the board members. "For years, I've seen this company as the enemy, as the symbol of everything my family lost. But now, I wonder if maybe we've all been wrong for too long." Gabriel felt a flicker of hope. "Marcus, I know there's a lot of history, a lot of pain between our families, but I also believe there's an opportunity here to do something truly extraordinary." Reeves nodded slowly. "I need time to consider it. This isn't a decision I can make alone or lightly." The chairman of the board cleared his throat. "I believe we all need time to process this proposal. I suggest we take a recess and reconvene in 48 hours to make a final decision." The motion was quickly approved, and soon the room began to empty. Gabriel stayed behind, exhausted but with a spark of optimism. Elizabeth approached him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Gabriel," she said softly. "You've shown true leadership today." Samuel joined them, his expression serious. "It was a risky play, but I believe it was the only option. Now we can only wait and see how it all unfolds." The next 2 days were an agony of waiting for Gabriel. He worked tirelessly, refining his proposal, preparing for any questions or objections that might arise. He also met privately with Sofia Mendoza, the journalist who had uncovered the connection between the companies. "Miss Mendoza," Gabriel told her during their meeting, "I deeply appreciate you coming to me with this information before publishing it. I want to be completely transparent with you about our plans and intentions." Sofia studied him carefully. "Mr. Varela, are you sure you want to do this? Once this story comes out, there will be no going back." Gabriel nodded. "I know, but I believe it's time for the truth to come to light. Whatever the outcome of the board vote, the public deserves to know the full story." Meanwhile, in the offices of GreenTech, Marcus Reeves was fighting his own internal battle. Gabriel's proposal had awakened feelings and memories he had kept buried for years. He found himself reviewing old family photographs, recalling stories his father had told him about the early days of the company. Finally, the day of the final meeting arrived. The tension in the boardroom was palpable. As everyone took their seats, Gabriel noticed that Marcus Reeves seemed to have aged years in just 2 days. The lines of worry deeply etched on his face. The chairman of the board called the meeting to order. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to make a decision that will determine the future of our company. Mr. Varela, Mr. Reeves, do you have anything to add before we proceed to the vote?" Gabriel stood up, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Only this. What I propose today is not easy. It will require all of us to set aside old grudges and work together in a way we never have before. But I believe with all my heart that it's the right thing to do, not just for our companies but for all the people whose lives we touch with our work." Reeves stood up slowly. Everyone in the room held their breath, waiting for his words. "I've spent the last 2 days reflecting on the past, the present, and the future," he began, "and I've come to a conclusion. Gabriel is right." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Reeves continued, "For too long, we've allowed the mistakes and grudges of the past to dictate our actions. It's time for a change. I support the merger proposal." The room erupted in a chaos of surprised and excited voices. Gabriel could hardly believe what he was hearing. He looked at Samuel and Elizabeth, who seemed equally astonished. The chairman had to bang his gavel several times to restore order. "Very well," he said finally. "Let's proceed to the vote." The next few minutes were the longest in Gabriel's life. One by one, the board members cast their votes. When the last vote was counted, the result was clear. The merger proposal had been approved by an overwhelming majority. Gabriel felt a surge of relief and emotion. They had done it against all odds. They had found a way forward. But as the congratulations and handshakes began around him, Gabriel knew this was just the beginning. The real work, the challenge of uniting 2 rival companies and healing decades of division, was only just beginning. What Gabriel didn't know was that, even as they celebrated this victory, new challenges were already brewing. The story of the merger and the hidden past of the companies would soon become public, and not everyone would be happy with these revelations. The path to redemption is never easy, and Gabriel was about to discover that the price of doing the right thing can sometimes be higher than one could ever imagine. The months following the merger decision were a whirlwind of activity. Gabriel, along with Marcus Reeves and a team of executives from both companies, worked tirelessly to make their vision of a unified and ethically responsible company a reality. The news of the merger and the history behind it, published by Sofia Mendoza, caused a stir in the industry and the media. There was criticism and skepticism, but also a wave of support from those who saw this as a bold step towards a more ethical and sustainable business future. Gabriel found himself at the center of a media storm, giving interviews, explaining the vision behind the merger, and defending his decision to be transparent about the company's past. Each day brought new challenges, but Gabriel faced them with a determination and clarity of purpose that surprised even those who knew him well. One afternoon, while Gabriel worked late in his office, he received an unexpected visit. It was Miguel, the old fisherman from the Caribbean island, where he had spent his exile. "Miguel!" exclaimed Gabriel, surprised and delighted. "What are you doing here?" Miguel smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "I came to see with my own eyes what my young friend has become. I've been following your story in the news." Gabriel was touched by the gesture. "I can't believe you came all this way. Please, sit down." As they shared a coffee, Gabriel told Miguel everything that had happened since his return. The old fisherman listened attentively, nodding from time to time. "You know, Gabriel," Miguel said finally, "when I met you on the island, I saw a lost man searching for his path. Now I see a man who has found his purpose." Gabriel felt a lump in his throat. "I wouldn't have gotten here without the lessons I learned from you, Miguel. You taught me to see beyond myself, to understand the true value of things." Miguel smiled warmly. "You had that wisdom within you all along, Gabriel. You just needed a little push to discover it." That night, after Miguel left, Gabriel sat reflecting on how far he had come from the arrogant, self-centered executive he had been to the leader he was now, committed to making a real difference in the world. The months passed, and the newly merged company, now called Ecotech Solutions, began to take shape. Gabriel and Marcus worked together to implement policies that prioritized sustainability and social responsibility. The River Cleanup Project, which had been the catalyst for all this change, became the flagship of their environmental initiatives. A year after the merger, Gabriel stood at the site of the former environmental disaster. The river, once polluted and lifeless, now flowed clean and clear. Vegetation had returned to its banks, and locals reported the return of species that hadn't been seen in years. By his side stood Marcus, Samuel, Elizabeth, and to his surprise, Sofia Mendoza, the journalist whose investigation had helped make all this possible. "It's incredible," said Sofia, looking around in amazement. "When I started investigating this story, I never imagined it would end like this." Gabriel nodded. "None of us did. But I think it demonstrates what's possible when we choose to do the right thing, even when it's hard." Marcus, who had gone from being a rival to an ally and close friend, put a hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "You know, for years, I thought avenging my family was the only way to honor their legacy. Now I see that the true way to honor them is by building something better than they ever imagined." Elizabeth, her face lined by the years, but her eyes shining with pride, approached Gabriel. "Your father would be proud of you, Gabriel. You've taken this company and led it beyond his wildest dreams." Gabriel felt a surge of emotion at her words. "Thank you, Elizabeth, for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." As the sun began to set, casting the sky in hues of gold and pink, the group stood in silence, contemplating the river and all it represented. It was a symbol of rebirth, of second chances, of the possibility of change and growth. Gabriel thought about the long and difficult road that had led him here, the mistakes he had made, the lessons he had learned, the relationships he had healed and forged. He thought about that flight, what seemed like a lifetime ago when his arrogance had blinded him to the needs of others. "You know," he said finally, breaking the silence, "someone once told me that every day is a gift. I understand now what that really means." The others nodded, each lost in their own thoughts and reflections. As the group prepared to leave, Gabriel lingered for a moment longer, looking at the river. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and moments of doubt, but for the first time in his life, he felt truly at peace with who he was and what he was doing. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky. Gabriel took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the fresh night air. Tomorrow would be a new day, filled with new opportunities to make a difference. With one last look at the river, Gabriel turned to join the others. As he walked, he felt a sense of purpose and determination he had never experienced before. The old Gabriel, Varela, was dead, and in his place, a new man had been born, one who understood that true success isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the lives you touch and the positive impact you leave on the world. As the group walked away, their silhouettes outlined against the night sky, Gabriel knew, with certainty, that this wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with promise and possibility. And so, with the soft murmur of the river as a soundtrack, Gabriel Varela took the first step into his future, ready to face whatever challenges might come, with the wisdom, compassion, and determination he had gained on his extraordinary journey of redemption.